Okay, what's today?
Yeah.
I know
All right.
pretty well.
Thursday.
Thanks.
Oh.
Today's Thursday, April 13th. I'd like to call the Economic Development Commission to order. First, I would like to introduce, we have three new members of the commission. Two are here right now. Mark Brady and Maura Fitzgerald. Welcome to the commission. If you could take 1 minute or less and let us just introduce yourselves and let us know what your background is, we would appreciate that. So Mark, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. I was born in Meriden when I was very young. 1952, actually. I lived there until I was 28. I got married, moved to Middletown. I got divorced and moved up here, married a Simsbury girl. She's since died. And I lived in a house in East Hartland for a while. That burned down, and I moved back to my mother's house in Meriden for a year and a half after I had surgery that killed me, and they brought me back. And I'm happy to be back in Simsbury with my friends. I'm a trained carpenter and designer, and my business is Mark Brady Kitchens. I design and build kitchens, and my college background is Disney University.
Okay.
In 1992, I took 2 courses, and they've served me very well since. So, anyway,
Good institution.
here I am.
Well,
Happy
thank
to
you
be
for
here.
your service.
Good morning. I'm Maura Fitzgerald. I lived in the town for about 23 years now. And my background is I used to be in corporate America, used to be a senior executive in running human resources for major corporations such as Fleet Bank. And I also helped in the merger between Fleet and Bank of America. I have backgrounds in mergers and acquisitions, and I also currently own 3 businesses currently in the area. I own an event planning organization called Simply Eventful, which basically does fundraising for the local nonprofits, helping them with their fundraisers and with their galas and events. And I also own another company called HR Employee Relations, or excuse me, HR Employee Matters, and that is my background is human resources. And so I provide consulting services to small to medium-sized businesses. And then I also own another local business called The Hair Loft, which is in Avon, and I've owned that for over 9 years. So I pretty much get involved in the community.
Great, thank you. And our third new member has just arrived. Sorry to put you on the spot, Evelyn Golden.
You're right on time.
It's 7:30, isn't it?
I'd like to welcome you to the commission. They were just doing a little blurb about what your background is. And so it's your turn. Put you on the spot now that you're seated.
Okay, I've been a Simsbury resident for almost 30 years, so I guess I'm a townie a little bit. Moved here from the Midwest, previously the New York area. Sorry, I'm catching my breath. Currently own a small business on West Street called Signature Marketing. My business partner and I, Jonas Stramitis, a lot of you know him. And I've had that business for, again, almost 30 years. So we do, some of what we do is promotional, some of what we do is environmental, and some of it, what we do is consulting. So we've been around town, experienced the business environment in Connecticut for a while, and have some thoughts.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And welcome to all of you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from March 9th, 2017.
Move their approval?
Second.
I do have a question about them from Dave Moore joined the meeting later, which is noted in the minutes. Does his attendance need to be at the beginning, recognize that was at the meeting?
I think we're okay.
We're okay? Okay. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. So we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is update from First Select Woman's Office. Tom Cook will be presenting that, and I know he has handed out a few items for us.
And the one in particular for economic development is in the First Select Woman's report towards the end. We have essentially started a running record, if you will, of what's going on in the economic development front. Many of the projects you see there have been there for some time. They're either waiting for the next step to happen, or we do have one update, and that is that on April 4th, the Silverman Group filed its zoning application for zoning plan approval. And that's so they're moving forward with the development of the north half of that property. And moving with some alacrity as we anticipated they would. This is a developer that's not willing to let its money just sit there. So that's good news for us in that it means that we're likely to have something we can tax in the not too distant future. I think, I'm not sure whether I think we are still waiting to see what's going to happen with the south portion of it, which is where the old Hartford building was. We are working with Chris and to bring in the Connecticut Economic Resource Center to do a seminar for us on the fundamentals of economic development. This is something that they work with us to they will provide an assessment of, they'll look at all the data and say, this is what the data says about you all. This is what we've seen work, and it's something that certainly we felt that should be co-sponsored by the Economic Development Commission. And it'll be at worst just another data point for us in terms of how we move forward with an economic development plan for you all. So those are really the two.
When will that happen, Tom?
We're right now the big economic development issue here right now is trying to avoid our utter defeat by the state budget. This is, you all I assume have heard, but the short version is if Malloy's budget was adopted, we'd be $4.6 million in the hole, including a large piece of the teacher's pension plan. So I understand that that's probably old news to you all, but what it's meant is that after now we've kept taxes flat for 3 years. We've had only very modest increases in taxes if you look back over 8 years. It's hard to maintain that. We're looking at some not very large increases just to maintain the status quo in terms of services here. And right now the Board of Finance has really been. We have to commend them. They've been terrific. They are taking a very responsible approach to how we respond to the uncertainty of what's happening at the state level. Currently, the theory is that we will know what the legislature wants to do, or we'll have a better idea by about April 27th, when the Appropriations Committee will come up with their version of a budget. We don't have any reason to expect that we will have anything resembling a final budget from the state by the time we have to make a decision on what we do with ours. So that means that we've got a lot of pieces still in play. And again, the Board of Finance is looking to both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen to come up with likely additional cuts to what they've presented. And both organizations, I know, are working behind the scenes to make sure that we have answers to that so that we can move forward. And the target right now is $1 million, which would be probably $800,000 out of the Board of Ed and $200,000 out of the Board of Selectmen budget. So, but because nothing is certain, the Board of Finance has not tried to set specific guidance at this point. We're just going to have to work together, and we're going to have to work together very quickly after we get the additional information in April to nail that down. So certainly from one perspective, when you look at our economic drivers here, they are our wonderful school system and fabulous libraries and great trails and paths, being a wonderful place to live. To the extent that we have to start cutting services, we have to be very careful about how we do that, because, again, those are our drivers. At any rate, that's what's going on right now. I don't think we had a ribbon cutting at Benny's. He's done a beautiful job redoing that. Sarah, thank you very much. That was a huge success. A lot of really good food I couldn't eat, but that's another story. And And what was the other one that, the fitness place?
Ideal.
Ideal weight.
Right.
Yes.
So things are continuing to move forward.
What's the timetable, Tom, on when they have to send out the tax?
We've got to get those bills out in time for a July 1 payment, so they've got to be out in June. And the last thing we want to do is do one bill and then have to do a supplemental bill or something like that. So
That all hinges on the legislature, right?
a lot of it does. Right now, when they're talking about things like saving $750 million from their union negotiations, which is right up there with I think it was the $300 million suggestion box a couple of years ago. This is so we'll have literally we'll be able to guess better towards the end of the month. But that's we can probably expect during the year that they'll come back and say we need something back as well.
So we're not looking to have this seminar
That's
until
what I-
after
my
June?
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Until after June at the
Yeah.
request of
So this
Lisa.
is just a heads up, but it's...
Well, we're going to be coordinating that, but out of respect to staff and the Board of Selectmen who are going to be dealing with our budget issues, which is very time consuming, we want to wait to have
Sure.
this because it's a
Okay.
collaborative effort.
Got it. Thank you.
Does that
Yeah.
help? It's a little ambiguous, but
Boy, did
after
I-
June.
Boy, did I take a long time not to answer your question. I apologize.
But thank you for the background information. Do you have any other items?
No, I have to
under
stop
that?
there.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the review of our FOIA guidelines. We have 5 new members of the EDC, and it's an appropriate time to review what the Freedom of Information Act requires us to do or not to do with regard to communication between the commissioners. So Tom is going to take the legal charge on that.
There are specific rules governing what boards and commissions can and can't do, public boards and commissions, in terms of ex parte communications, if you will. The key guideline here is that the deliberations of this commission have to be done in public, and it's true for the board, it's true for all commissions. That means that any kind of communication outside of a board or commission meeting, including emails back and forth, will likely be considered a meeting and an illegal meeting by the Freedom of Information Commission if it comes to that. This is certainly for our legislative bodies and for the Board of Finance, those boards that are in a position of making decisions about budgetary matters, things like that. I think there's a heightened level of awareness because the scrutiny is there as well. But the long and the short of it is, in order to guarantee access to the public, your deliberations really have to take place here, right now. And that means I gave you some communication I had with Tom Hennick. Tom is he's the Freedom of Information Education Officer for the Freedom of Information Commission. We have a very good relationship with him, I'm happy to say. Believe me, that is important. They know about our issues, they know about the people they're likely to see who complain, and because we've done a good job of staying in the lane, we get some credit for that. Where this really ends up playing out, of course, is in the world of email. And I think what's important is that if you have something you want to bring to the attention of the Commission, the best thing to do is to communicate directly with me. I can communicate with anybody all day long, anytime. I'm not a member of the Commission. My role is really to make sure that you guys are functioning as well as possible. I, in turn, would be in a position to get something on the agenda working with Chris. That way we can avoid any claim that you all have been colluding in the background with cigars lit. And it really, if we follow this, it doesn't really impede the flow of information. It obviously would be easier if you all could talk whenever you wanted, but you just have to be careful about those communications. And on that, in terms of verbal communications, I would just say use your judgment. There's not a document that can be produced to FOIA. It's just a matter of what the spirit of the statute is to make sure that deliberations and decisions are made here. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to send questions to Tom Hennick if you want. Yes, Mark.
Is what we say here recorded?
Usually. I don't know.
Televised today. He was here this morning.
Is somebody here?
Yes, he's
all right,
here
good.
from SCTV.
Perfect. So yes,
Okay.
it's recorded, and we usually have a clerk. In this particular situation, the clerk will probably work from the SCTV to recording to do the minutes.
Does anybody have any questions about what the protocol is? No? Okay.
Thank you.
For hearing me out. Feels rather like jury duty. We'll talk about the case.
Don't talk about it. So the next item on our agenda is the discussions of duties and responsibilities of the new Economic Development Commission. Prior to starting that discussion, Tom, I just want to provide our 3 new members just with the spreadsheet I had provided regarding similar towns to us that I had handed out at the last meeting to the other commissioners about size and structure of those economic development commissions. So to get the new members up to speed, Tom is going to take the charge on doing the research and the background information for our discussions for each of the meetings. We have an agenda set for the topic for each meeting that we're going to be discussing. So we have a target goal of delivering a report to the Board of Selectmen in November as our recommendations as a commission. So I believe Tom Cook handed out a hard copy of the discussion regarding the discussion today, which is about the duties and responsibilities of the proposed new Economic Development Commission. So with that being said, the stage is yours.
Oh, okay. Just to, again, to help refresh the new members about this, I have in front of me a copy of the work plan and timetable for this project. The project fundamentally is that 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, the first Selectman and Sean Askham, have asked this commission to prepare a proposal to be given to the Board of Selectmen about a formation of a new Economic Development Commission to be appointed by the new Board of Selectmen in 2018, as opposed to the current Board of Selectmen, which has been appointed by the town committees. So the appointments to this is by the revision to the town charter, that this new commission is going to be created, and the members will be, that's the major difference, is that the members are appointed by the Board of Selectmen rather than the town committees. But the 2 members of the Board of Selectmen have asked us to take on a special project to advise them on what the duties and responsibilities of that Economic Commission should be, to advise them on the plan of organization and resource requirements, including how many members and what kind of people. And we added to their charge another component to make proposals as to new business development strategies that we would think should be part of the brief going forward. And our goal was to prepare a report on all this and submit it to the Board of Selectmen as soon as possible. Chris has mentioned a November date. I was hoping we could do it much sooner than that. Like my own personal target is September. At our March 9th meeting, which was one of my first meetings, I basically volunteered to be the project director to lead this project and was appointed by this commission as project director. And my first responsibility was to bring to this meeting a proposal regarding duties and responsibilities of the new Economic Development Commission, which are quite different from the duties and responsibilities, which are different in some respects to the duties and responsibilities of this commission historically. And so I've captured the proposals in this document, which has been sent to everyone prior to this meeting, dated April 7th. And I think maybe Chris, if with your permission, as a way to proceed, perhaps it would be a good idea for us to have a motion to accept this proposal and then discuss it. Or would you prefer?
I think we need to have discussion before we
Okay,
accept the
fine.
proposal.
All right, so here's the proposal here. It is pretty much self-explanatory, and I don't think I should read through it because it would take a long time to do that, but you've all had a chance to review it, and so maybe the best way to proceed is, does anybody have any questions or comments about this?
I do, Tom. What did you use as a basis or as an example to come up with the duties and responsibilities? What research or what other aspects?
I looked at about 15 Economic Development Commission websites.
Okay.
All over the state. I tried to do it for towns that were roughly similar to this one.
Okay.
But I found some interesting ones for towns that are not similar to this one. And so that's the first and only piece of research that I did. Because what I discovered is that many towns don't even specify what the duties and responsibilities are. Others simply make general statements to promote the economic welfare of the town. But most towns take the language of the state statute that governs economic development commissions and puts that on their website. So that's
Okay. Yeah, because basically you want these to kind of meet the needs of the local organization or local town. So that's why I was saying if you copy something from the state, well, that's the state, but we are probably different. And that's why I was trying to get an understanding, or if we were going by another town, say Bridgeport, New Haven or something, that may not fit what our needs are. And that's why I was trying to get an understanding on the basis of what the duties and
And to
responsibilities.
give you some background information, I know Tom Cook shared with the new commissioners the Fairweather report and the task force findings that were done over a year ago, actually now. And that provides a lot of good background information because there's still a lot of recommendations in both of those reports that have yet to be implemented that are very appropriate for our town because it was research done for our town.
Those were
So,
both, over to your point, very town-specific. The
Right.
Fairweather report was actually still a draft report. It was
Okay.
supposed to be a first cut. But it did look very specifically at, for example, what should be happening in the north end of town, whether or not you could take Tarryville and make that a focus for arts communities. And so I think that is an important piece that has to be there. And Chris is also right that the Technology Task Force did a terrific job.
Economic development.
Economic development, sorry.
They did a great job too, but.
Too many boards and commissions for me. The Economic Development Task Force put together very specific recommendations, and one of which I forgot to report on today, and that is that almost all of the Zoning Commission went to a land use planning educational seminar. Again, one of the things that that task force was concerned about was that all of our boards and commissions be truly well educated in the subject matter areas that they serve. So there are pieces out there that are quite specific already. Fairweather report is now quite, I want to say that was a 2012 or 13 report, but even still, I think very good background. It will. The other thing I think we may want to do at some point, if you'll allow me, Chris, to suggest this, is maybe have Jamie Rabbit come and talk to us about where things are with the plan of conservation and development. That will have, of course, major economic development components as well.
Well, and for those of you who aren't, up to speed on that, or getting up to speed on that, it's really the Main Street area of town, and what is approved or potentially approved for each parcel, and what type of businesses can be located there, and where our opportunities are for us to attract new business to the area. So,
And that there's a statutory deadline for when that has to be done, and it is this year. So I think to the extent we can get you guys involved in some, I mean, even if unofficially, it's just really important that I think that be coordinated.
Well, to get back to these duties and responsibilities and to be responsive to Maura's question, there are 7 duties and responsibilities specified in this document, and I put behind each one of them sort of how they relate to our town. This is responsive to this very good question. The first one, which is to prepare a strategic plan for economic development, presented to the Board of Selectmen as soon as possible, was mandated to us by the Board of Selectmen. The number 2, to conduct economic development research, is required by the statute in the event that an EDC is formed. Number 3 is coordinating the activities of various organizations, is also required by statute. Number 4, to make recommendations consistent with the strategic plan, is required by statute. Number 5 is historical precedent here in this town to advocate at the local and state level for economic development projects. That's what this commission has been doing for years. I was the chair of this commission at one point and spent a fair amount of time myself doing that. Number 6 is to endeavor to assist economic developers in their attempts to initiate projects in Simsbury. Is also a historical precedent. This commission has been very effective in doing that, and their work I've admired very much over the years. And then finally, prepare and present an annual report of this commission, or the new commission's activities and recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, Planning Commission, and so forth, is also required by statute. So some of this is required by statute, and some of it is historical precedent, and none of it is particularly new.
okay. No. So I think, so let's start at the very basic. One of the recommendations that we need to make is what the makeup of the board is. How many members, what the term is.
That's the next project. If you look at the timetable, the next project is May 11th.
Correct.
And May 11th is the date at which we at least have scheduled a discussion of the plan of organization and resource requirements. And that plan of organization, of course, would address the question of the number of people on the commission, the type of people on the commission. And I have added to that resource requirements, and that's an issue that I want to bring up to the commission for some pretty intense discussion at the May 11th meeting, because it is clear to me, and I'm sure it's clear to every member of this commission, that if we adopt these duties and responsibilities, there is no way the new Economic Development Commission can do those things, to accomplish those things. No way they can do it with the resources that are available to this commission. It's just not going to be possible. And so on the May 11th meeting, I'm going to suggest to this commission what kind of resources are required so that those resources can be built into the 2018-19 budget cycle. I have considered the possibility of revisions to the existing budget, but there's just no realistic possibility that we can build any. Something else would have to come out in order for us to put resources in for at this point.
But I do want people to keep in mind that what I was going to say was, because we're discussing this at the next meeting, at the makeup of the board, the number of people, the amount of time that they're going to be on the board, you need to take that into consideration when you're considering the proposed duties and responsibilities, because you want to make sure that when we have the discussion at the next meeting, that whatever we're adopting today regarding their duties and responsibilities is something that is achievable for the new board based on the makeup that we're going to recommend, because we don't want to set ourselves up for failure. We want to make sure that we're thoughtful with regard to backgrounds, the representation on the board, the length of term, that it's not too short, that we're not constantly re-educating people about the process, but it's not too long. So we have new ideas and all of that. So keep that in mind when we're discussing the duties and responsibilities, because we want to make sure that this is successful.
Well, just to build on that comment, I would observe that the things that have been mentioned about the number of people and the type of people and the terms are very important. But at the end of the day, historically and probably in the future, most, if not all, the members of this commission will be full-time working people. And to the extent that there has been criticism of this commission and its ability to accomplish anything, and there has been in the past, as everybody knows, one of the really big issues is that most members of the commission simply don't have the time to do these things. They just don't. And the only way to get these things done is to have members on this commission that are willing and able to work outside of the time limits of the meetings themselves, and or have resources that are human resources and financial resources that are dedicated to the mission of this Economic Development Commission. My own view is that the makeup of the and this is related. I'm really glad you brought it up because it's related to these duties. These are scary. And I believe that the only way the new commission is going to be able to be successful is to have members who are willing and able to work a certain number of hours between meetings to take on projects and actually accomplish them and report. And in addition, I believe that the commission must have dedicated resources, financial and human, outside of the commission members themselves.
And so there are several of us who have dedicated countless hours to this despite our full-time jobs. But one of the new provisions under the new charter, and is that the town manager and the first select woman or person, whoever that may be, one of the recommendations for the Economic Development Task Force had made was that the role of I believe they refer to it as CEO of the town, fall into the hands of the first select person's position in terms of being the outward face of economic development for the community, which Lisa has been doing quite a bit of in conjunction with the assistance of Sarah and Tom and meeting with new developers. So the recommendation from the task force was that outward-facing, meeting, taking calls from developers and builders and outreach to companies, in light of the fact that we don't have the resources to hire an economic development coordinator because we don't have that in the budget. That was the role of the first select person's position as a recommendation from the task force. So hence the reason we've got the first selectman's report now in place, and there's economic development reporting going on, and constant outreach to local businesses to determine what their needs are, what can we do to keep you, are you expanding, all of those items. Am I correct?
Yes, I think that's described. Again, Tom, that's given the resources that we currently have. I mean, there's certainly one thought was that the economic development function ought to be headquartered in the CEO's office. A call from the first select person, or eventually the town manager, being something that probably still shows you care, if nothing else. There are resources that are being devoted to economic development, as Chris has laid out, but to your point, there really aren't a lot of resources available to this commission in terms of being able to do a lot of research or support an expanded activity. Again, that's why I think back on the Economic Development Task Force, that was I'd be willing to bet that there were over 100 meetings, the different subcommittees, by the time all was said and done.
We can attest to many of those.
So it is, to do something like that is, I think to Tom's point, very, very labor intensive, and that there will have to be members on the commission who have the time to do that. And again, whether as you guys take this a very good project farther down the road, I think it'll be a lot easier to identify what type of resource you're really thinking about in terms of HR and dollars for the future.
I have a question. The young lady in the back row is very familiar with what goes on in the town, and I'm not sure whether you're a Main Street employee now or you're a town employee. To whom do you report?
I am a Main Street employee. I work very closely with the town of Simsbury, but I am I'm the executive director of a 501c3 nonprofit organization. I report to a board of directors of 14 people located in Simsbury, a variety of business owners, retired people, you name it, in the community. But we're a quasi-public organization. I write grants on behalf of the town. I spearhead and work through projects. I do business retention, business meetings, marketing, branding for the town of Simsbury, press releases when necessary, things like that. But I'm still a private nonprofit employee. I do not work directly. I'm not on the town's payroll.
But in terms of resources, I think the town makes some contribution or something to Main Street to carry that, right?
Investment.
It's always been part of the
Yes.
Economic Development Commission's budget, but because of the new structure,
Right.
it's now falling under the first select woman's
Exactly.
budget line item, correct?
So in order for that to make sense in terms of the town's investment, Sarah works very, very closely with us. If we meet half a dozen times in a month, that's a light month. And I think that is with that transition, the coordination has gotten a lot better.
Yeah. And just a reminder to this commission, as you're going through the exploratory process, that there are a lot of resources that are currently devoted to economic development. Main Street works very closely with the town. You also have the the Business Resource Center at the library. The Business Resource Center is now, with Sarah Laudenschweiger, is now really responsible for helping start up businesses that are not bricks and mortar. If she gets an inquiry from a business that is either a home-based business or wants to grow into a bricks and mortar or wants space in Main Street, in downtown, she kicks it over to myself and Jamie. Between Jamie and I, we determine where that business is, who will reach out to the business, and follow through, whether it's getting space, doing PR, matching them with services. Currently, we have a ton of small businesses that are looking for gap financing, funding. We're doing a lot of stuff again with DECD, the Small Business Express program, CT Innovations. There's a ton of resources, but there is a framework in place currently, spearheaded by the First Selectman's office. Tom Cook, same thing. You'll get inquiries off of the website. He'll then parcel them out to either myself or Jamie. We'll coordinate again who's going to be responsible. If they're in the startup process, we kick them back down to Sarah and go up through that process. Otherwise, we can match them with SCORE. So there is a very strong framework currently
Resources.
resources
Yeah.
that are working
That's good
and
to know.
devoted to small businesses.
Thank you.
And anyone who inquires on the website or the EDC page and the contact us about business development, it goes directly to Tom.
Yeah.
So it,
There is a lag time of hours from getting an email like that and getting it in the hands of Jamie or Sarah. The goal is, of course, to determine, as Sarah suggests, how far along the development curve for the business is, whether it's really still preliminary or whether they're ready to go straight to Jamie Rabbit to start talking about what kinds of what kind of land is available, what kind of permitting would be needed, that kind of thing.
the only
Tom,
question,
go ahead.
the only question I have on the proposed duties and responsibilities or comment is under number 5 with the historical precedent regarding our advocating for economic development projects. Historically, we've always had a good relationship with the planning office and have seen projects come before the board for endorsement or not, depending on what the function, what it is. And we haven't seen that of us in the past, I would say, year. much of that at all. And I think there needs to be better coordination or better partnership with the planning office to get, one of the recommendations of the Economic Development Task Force Commission was that in order to reduce the costs for a developer to come before this board and then go to the planning board and then go to the zoning board, was to coordinate one presentation from the developer to all three of the boards, a collaborative, because it's very expensive for a developer to bring their attorneys and architects and whoever in to do the dog and pony show at three different commissions. And I don't believe that that has yet been achieved, and I think we're trying to be more streamlined, and it's certainly not for the approval process of the project, but for the initial presentation of the project, becoming a part of that, so we can then at the next Economic Development Commission meeting determine whether or not we're going to write a letter of endorsement to the planning and zoning boards about that particular project with regard to its economic viability, not the scope of the project, because that's not within our job description, but, so to speak. But I think that that needs to be an important, I believe, an important component to our partnership with the other boards. And certainly, that was identified as a big opportunity for us as a town through the task force. So I don't know if there's any discussion regarding that.
I would add to that, that particularly now with the fun that we're having in Hartford with the budgeting process, having a voice in Hartford when the state legislature is considering what it will promote and what it will cut. I think they need to hear from a whole bunch of different constituencies, but our economic development is hinged in large part with what the state does or doesn't fund. So we should have a voice there, and whether we've traditionally done that before or not, if we have, great, let's restart that tradition. If we haven't, let's start. And the only other thing that I would note is this, what we're doing now in considering the duties and considering in May how we're going to recommend constitution of the commission is a lot like the budgeting process, is a lot like a budget. A budget essentially is a wish list that is codified, and it is a structure by which we accomplish the wish list. Well, what we are doing here is creating a little more than a wish list, but creating a structure by which this commission will govern itself in the future. That being said, budgets and what we are doing are living documents. They can be changed, they can be altered. So if we were to, for instance, endorse the 7 things that we have before us today as duties, and we then next meeting come up with how we think the board, commission, et cetera, however you want to term us, is to be constituted, and that might require tweaking with the duties, we can do that. So we don't have to feel like we're setting in stone today what the duties are. This is something that we can continue to revisit until we're ready to
Well, no, because we're going to have a final report that we're going to have
Right.
to vote on.
That's a very good point, because once the new government gets put into effect, we're going to be formed by what the Board of Selectmen are going to want.
Yep.
So we can recommend what we think, but it won't be solidified until the new Board of Selectmen come in place. So I think we should perhaps have a frame, but I think we ought to not spend a lot of time on it, because it's subject to not only ratification, but change and implementation by the new board that's going to come in. So we're in kind of an amorphous state that's going on here, where we're going to be under different jurisdiction. They'll determine how many members we're going to have. They'll determine how often we're going to meet, blah, blah, blah. All those things perhaps will come up. So for us to push forward, I don't object to it. I just think we ought to recognize that maybe we got the cart before the horse.
Well, I recognize that it's ultimately their decision to vote on, but I think very strongly that they're going to, I would hope, that based on the research that has been done and the discussions that we've had, that they're going to seriously review our recommendations and take them to heart and hopefully accept them, because it's been a thoughtful, thorough process with the vetting of this information that, and hopefully the report that we provide them is going to not lend them to question that. So Tom, you were going to make it.
I just wanted to speak to Dave's point on advocacy. We do have advocacy in here as your point 5 for economic development projects, but as we did have, as Jay DeVivo pointed out in the last few weeks, there was a proposal being considered by the legislature, which I would agree with Jay is a very important thing for us, and that is it's coming up later, the municipal gain, and Connecticut, to the extent we've got things going for us, we do actually have a lot going for us. One of them is that we actually do have a pretty good fiber optic network already being built out. The legislation in question would have made it harder for the town to use the telephone poles for fiber build out and for use of that fiber beyond towns. It would be, I'm sure, very welcome in the first select woman's office to have a group that was willing to recognize the economic development issues that are being created by the state legislature and to be willing to address them and submit testimony. So that might be I suggest that the commission might want to consider broadening that 5th point to include not just advocacy for economic development projects, but advocacy and economic development issues in general.
Issues. Okay, there have been 2 comments, one by Chris and one by Tom, that relate directly to point number 5. And as you've been discussing that, very, very interesting input, I've revised number 5.
You're quick.
And I mean, I could sharpen the language, but it would read something like this. Right now, it reads, advocate at the local and state level for economic development projects that have the potential to expand the town's grand list. A change I would suggest is number 5, review economic development proposals together with other commissions, and then advocate at the local and state level for economic development projects and issues, and for economic development projects that have the potential consistent with the plan of conservation and development to expand the town's grand list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's better.
And so I would offer that as a revision to this. But related to the discussion that we're having now and the discussion we'll have next week, I want to ask Tom a couple of questions, if that's okay. And this has to do with resources. The first question is, has the town settled on a job description for the first selectman that includes this economic development responsibility or not?
The answer is no. They have, we are at the beginning of a process with the creation of the new town manager position of coming up with a description of those duties. And as part of that, if I can, the Board of Selectmen voted last night, they're going to interview 3 executive search firms. One of those firms will be chosen. One of the primary concerns of the Board of Selectmen is that this is the first town manager the town will have ever put in place. There is, at this point, not really, to Tom's point, not a lot of clarity about who does what in the next iteration of town government here. That's going to be a critical part of what the executive search firm does. There will have to be, at the outset, a hard look with a lot of public involvement at what the functions are, what people expect of the town manager, what people expect of their town government. How that all gets laid out will be critical to doing the search. We have to know what we're asking people to do when we go out to recruit them. So I think that there will be clarity in terms of what happens in the executive office here, Tom, and what the first select person's role will be. I don't know whether or not we'll actually see a job description for the first select person, but I do think that's going to be up to the Board of Selectmen to determine whether they want to do something above and beyond what the charter says. But in the past, it's always just been the charter. There has never been a job description for the first select person. But that would be something that you all could address the Board of Selectmen on. It is important that the framework for economic development be clear to people.
Okay, well, that's really valuable input, and so I guess we're going to have to put it on our agenda to discuss that at our next meeting and maybe make a firm recommendation about that component in a job description to me. I would say that it must be specific, not vague. And the second question that I think the rest of the commission will be interested in is the status of your job. You had mentioned to me that, and I didn't realize this, that your particular position is going to be changed or eliminated.
Right.
And there's going to be kind of a restructuring of responsibility. And so this commission will want to know, going forward, what is the nature of that reorganization and how will that affect the use of town staff?
Mm-hmm.
Town manager, first selectman,
right,
for economic development, and that doesn't require a response right now. But I think we need to know that.
Well, that is, yeah, and that's I know that the budget is currently proposed as my position evaporating on the 4th of December of this year. We have
Merry Christmas.
and I think that makes sense. I think part of the challenge here is that there may be some uncertainty about what staffing looks like as we go through this transition. Part of it will be to let the next chief executive officer of the town decide what and recommend what staffing needs to be in place. We've had we always seem to be operating one person short in the first select woman's office. With the departure of Joe Mancini as our finance director, Sean Kimball, who was formerly my deputy, moved over into finance. We went for the better part of a year without a deputy director of administrative services. We now have somebody very good who I anticipate would likely land in the position of assistant town manager if this reorganization follows what other towns do. But, Tom, it's a very good point. I think, again, the taking the time and effort to identify what resources you all feel are necessary is quite timely, as it will not only inform the next Board of Selectmen, but the next the first town manager about what kinds of resources are recommended for a robust economic development program.
Well, another thing it's going to inform, and I'll bring this up as well, we have an election coming up in November for a Board of Selectmen, including a first selectman. Mm-hmm. And we have Republican and Democrat town committees who are going to nominate people to run for those positions, including first selectman. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that it would make a great deal of sense for the nominating committees of those two commissions and the town committees at large, for those two, let me back up. It would make sense to me for the Republican town committee and a Democratic town committee to know what the job description is for the first selectman so that they can nominate people that fit those criteria. And if the first selectman is going to have a significant role in economic development, then the nominating committees, the town committees, are going to have to take that into account. Wouldn't you think?
I think you.
When do the nominations have to be submitted by?
I think you push it into an area that's none of our business. It's our business, but I don't think we should try to influence the political process.
I don't think we're
That's my
influencing it.
opinion.
We're
Well,
we're not
that's what-
influencing it. They're
that's
giving a
what-
job description.
That's what he's
supporting.
suggesting.
The nominations have to
The skill set of the
Or- or-
nomination, yeah.
Right.
The skill set needs to match the job
It
description,
certainly does.
so.
So what can we do about that? Do you think we can get the current Board of Selectmen to give us a draft soon?
I think you could ask them for guidance on.
Ask them for guidance.
Yeah, and that's just in terms of what.
When does the Board of Selectmen have to have job descriptions to the headhunters by?
Well,
for the
in
town
fact,
manager
the-
position?
The headhunters will likely, a draft has been created, and by yours truly, based largely on the charter the requirements for the town manager, and also looking at several other job descriptions for town managers elsewhere. For example, West Hartford.
West Hartford.
I relied heavily on that. It was, I thought, very well done. That said, it needs to be customized to the town of Simsbury based on input from you all and residents, other boards and commissions. And so that will be probably the first task of the executive search firm, is to come up with because you don't go out to search until you know what you're asking for. And that's, but that, Tom, that may be 6 weeks away, 8 weeks away.
Chris, what do you think the appropriate process would be to request guidance from the current Board of Selectmen on this matter? Would that be something you would recommend to them or ask them for?
We can ask for a copy of the draft of the initial job description, certainly,
Town manager.
for town manager,
Yeah,
and
but it's the
then,
first selectmen, for these nominating committees, need to know what the first selectmen.
I understand, I think we need to have a discussion in our May agenda about what our recommendation is regarding economic development, recommendations for the first selectman's position,
Great.
because we can't speak to other responsibilities that should be in that job description, but can make a recommendation regarding the economic development component,
Great.
because that's within our purview. Anything outside of that, I think, is a slippery slope that we should not be on.
Okay, well, I just made a note of that, and I'll make sure.
And we
that-
can add that we can include that in the agenda prior to our discussion of the NEDC objectives for that meeting.
Great.
Okay, and then whatever's passed or not passed, or if we pass a recommendation, I will write a letter on behalf of the commission.
Okay, good.
Speaking of the agenda, what I will do is move that we adopt the proposed NEDC duties and responsibilities as has been presented and amended today relative to number 5, so that we can then go forward.
Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
I'll abstain.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you for your hard work on that, Tom, and your continued. So we've got discussion of municipal gain issues.
I think we've more or less covered that.
Okay.
The news is, it's just fascinating, though. There have been, there's some state initiatives to try to, actually municipal initiatives to try to get fiber optic cable to people's homes. And in a world where the 640,000 square foot office buildings are disappearing and people are increasingly doing small business ventures from homes, we're in a good place if that actually plays out. But when these initiatives were announced, what was fascinating was the number of representatives from Comcast and Verizon and the incumbents who show up at these things. It was Verizon that was trying to limit the use of municipal gain on poles. So this is a market issue. And it's something that we've got to stay on top of. It's again, the backbone of a good fiber optic system in the state could really, really help, given the fact that we have a lot of high-tech stuff going on. So that's, and I think Jay was pointing that out in his email. The good news was that bill never made it out of committee, so we're okay for now. But the people who are anxious to hang on to the ownership of cable are not going away.
Yeah, it's interesting, just as a sidebar, if zoning board has reviewed the zoning regulations in town to consider home-based businesses now, because it's becoming more and more frequent, and really what constitutes a home-based business, and is that a zoning, does that conflict with the current zoning regulations as in place? Because that's an interesting...
That's a very good point that I'll send straight to Jamie, particularly as they're doing the POCD and the review of the
Right.
zoning regs right now.
Because there is some language in the zoning regulations regarding that, but we're living in a new world.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Mark?
When I lived here before, cell service stunk in the town. I have Verizon LTE service now with 2 bars all the time on Firetown Road, and it just seems silly that if you're trying to develop the economic well-being of an area today, that cell service stink. That seems silly. Have we done anything to
Yes, we have.
prove that?
Yes,
Yeah.
we have. We are in active discussions with Verizon in particular right now. I've been here for going on 7 years now, and virtually every cell phone call I've gotten in this building dropped after about 30 seconds.
I've learned why, though. There's a because we have the same issue in our office with certain carriers, and it's because there's a regulation with regard to the strength of the signal that comes out of a tower, okay, has to be limited immediately around the tower. So the closer you are to a tower, potentially the worse service you have because of the EMFs that are coming off of the tower.
That's interesting.
So the good news is that they did actually fix the problem here. Right now, you should be getting 4
I
or
have
5
5 bars.
There we go.
At my house on Firetown, I get 2.
But we included, I can't remember, Sarah, if you were there, but I know
Verizon meeting.
Yeah, Sarah was there, Chamber of Commerce was there to make it clear that the fact that it's hard, even along Route 10 here, to get good cell phone service is an issue. And they are looking into that, hopefully not at utility speed. But I worked for Ameritech for a while ago, so I know about that. But at any rate, that is an important issue here.
Well, it is from the standpoint of home-based businesses, too.
Sure.
Because it's internet connectivity is a huge issue.
True, but just a reminder that it's a marketing point for Simsbury because the Small Business Resource Center at the library also has an incubator space that the First Selectman, the marketing report, Main Street, we've all been working on. They have rooms where people can do web conferences and all sorts of things in private, and they're actually getting towards, if they don't have yet, a feature where you can send something from your home-based computer to be printed at the library and picked up, and all sorts of things. So it works both negatively and also positively because we have this business resource center at the library.
Okay, just 2 further questions related to our previous agenda item. One is, for purposes of the minutes of the meeting, I'll prepare a revision that has been voted on, and I'll send it to you to
Yes, and
incorporate.
we'll attach those to the minutes.
Okay, and the second question is about the plan of conservation and development. We haven't discussed it yet, how it relates to economic development activity, and I'm just wondering, myself and maybe on behalf of the commission, what is the status of the POCD and when can we have a look at it?
I think there is an internal draft. I don't know if that's ready for prime time yet, Tom. Let me get answers to you on that, and what I'll do is I'll talk to Chris about it. I do think that if you guys have time for it, having a few minutes from Jamie at our next meeting, and if a draft's available, then I can certainly try to circulate an electronic copy to all of you.
It would be great if we could have a look at it, even if it's not ready for prime time.
I understand.
Okay. All right. Do I have a...
If I could just have one little interjection before I move for adjournment. Sarah, thank you for getting the word out about the Benny's ribbon cutting, because it was great to be there and to be a part of things, and I really appreciate the work that you do. Tom, thank you for the yeoman work that you do. I really feel that even though some outsiders have felt that this commission is moribund, that there is little that we could do, especially with the charter change, I feel very differently, because I think that we have a committed group here who really cares about how we are going to go forward. I think the work that we are doing here could very well be just dust in the wind, or it could very well be the structure upon which the new organization not only takes off from, but really helps this town. And I want to just say that I'm very happy to be a part of it. And now, Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I move to,
All those in favor?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I'll see you next month. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
It's been a while, isn't it, that this table was full?
I had to add an extra chair today. I was so excited.